Hi there, dreamers. Welcome back to Bed in 10, the cozy corner of the internet where we leave the day behind and float into a world of calm and imagination. Tonight, I'm here to help you escape the stresses of daily life, relax, and drift into a peaceful sleep, or simply carry you away from overthinking and into a calmer state with a soft spoken short story. Come join me in our storyscape. Here, you release all of the tension in your body as the narrative releases the tension from your mind. So, you can start by making yourself comfortable, fluffing up your pillows, closing your eyes, and focusing on your breath as you listen. Don't get caught up in how many inhales or how many exhales. Just focus on the feeling of the air. Focus your body, focus your consciousness on the air. The feeling of the air entering and exiting your nose. The coolness of the air touching your nostrils, or the dryness of the air, the tickling of the air, the sustenance, the nourishment. Focus only on that feeling as we take a dive into this bedtime tale. Our story opens up on a quiet cul-de-sac. Trees of all kinds were neatly aligned in a neat semicircle around the street. The leaves and branches danced with the breeze. The cool morning breeze tickled them into fits of giggles that gave off the sound shh, 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 shh. Mornings like these were peaceful and serene. All was quiet except for the coo of the morning doves and the chattering dawn chorus of sparrows and finches. They had important plans to call their fellow feathered friends about, like worms, bugs, and birdhouses to pillage. As the birds called on one another, squirrels scattered and scurried beneath them. The squirrels had the important mission of searching for seeds and hickory nuts they'd buried and stowed away. A fool's errand, but a natural imperative nonetheless. Above the squirrels and amongst the taller trees, the sound of old 80s pop blasted from a neighbor's window. Steam clouded and billowed from the window as water blasted from the shower head. It abruptly stopped as the story's protagonist stepped out from the shower, wrapping himself with a soft, fluffy towel. He scrubbed his hair dry and dabbed off water from himself before quickly moisturizing and getting dressed. He hurried downstairs to grab an iced coffee, his meal-prepped breakfast and lunch. He scoffed down his breakfast burrito, chugged his coffee, packed his lunch, and headed toward the front door. Lastly, before he left, he snatched his keys and ID badge that hung from his lanyard. The badge read, Corey Yofer. Corey was a really chill and nonchalant kind of guy. He learned that life doesn't have to involve strain and stress, nor worrying about the shoulds, the coulds, or the woulds. He reminded himself of that as he let his rag top down to his convertible. It was a 2004 Sebring. He knew it wasn't anything impressive, but that's what he loved about it. Corey enjoyed being low-key. He left behind his family's high-class lifestyle years ago for a humble living. He grew up rich with a prestigious family, a long line of politicians. And not just a long line. His family tree's political ties dated back all the way to the Articles of Confederation. Corey's family had foundational bonds to this land. He took pride in that. He couldn't take pride in what his family devolved into over the years. Their values of legality and equity became warped and adulterated into wealth hoarding, excess, and ostentation. He denounced his family name after being given an ultimatum. He was forced to decide to choose between following the path that had been set for him or going his own way, but without his family's access, assets, or money. Corey was only 18 at the time, but he carried no angst in regard to the fork in the road he was placed before. He knew at a young age that he would forge his own path in life. He got his shrewd business acumen from his mother, one trait he was never ashamed of. When Corey was young and still had access to his clan's perks, he enlisted the services of their accountant and wealth manager to set him up to have a comfortable life post his disownment. Corey got a job as soon as the ink dried on his work permit. He saved every penny, and by the time he was ready to graduate high school, he could pursue his dreams without the safety and shield of his family crest. Now, he was on the road of freedom. Corey didn't need the social capital that came with their rigid rules and restrictions. He reminded himself of how lucky he was as he pulled into the parking lot. He was a little behind everyone's typical arrival, but it was better than having to suffer through the Monday water cooler chatter. Corey didn't feel like hearing his coworkers' attempt at dry bragging about whatever generic TikTok-hyped event they attended, or suffering through someone's embellished tale of drinking and revelry at an attempt to seem like they had a rich and exciting life outside of work. The person he really hoped to avoid was Miss Barnes. Her surname was befitting for her because she resembled a barn mouse. She had beady eyes, big ears, and mousy brown hair she used to hide their size. Miss Barnes' ears weren't extremely big. They just appeared that way because she was a tiny and petite woman. Her mousy stature was misleading, almost a disguise, because Miss Barnes was not meek by any means. Her family came from a long line of boisterous Benedict Arnolds, the kind of people who would turn coat to climb the social ladder. So Corey did his best to keep his distance, especially because she knew him from his past life. Barnes never neglected the chance to harken back to the time they met at his family's annual gala. She knew him by a different name then, and even though she knew Corey wants to keep that under wraps, she would taunt him whenever they were amongst their fellow coworkers. Corey always felt nervous when she uttered certain syllables, fearing that that would be the moment his bloodline would be exposed. Even though Corey cut ties with his family, he was still bound by extreme legal documents, clauses, and contractual agreements. He didn't want to risk facing the penalties or consequences that would come from a blabbermouth gossip like Barnes. So that morning, Corey was thankful to be able to walk the halls straight to his classroom without a run-in. He hurried in, placed his lunch into his mini fridge by his desk, then lifted the blinds to let the sun in. Rays of light beamed over the posters of great men and women in history, their iconic quotes embossed and highlighted amongst music albums from great revolutionary changemakers like Ornette Coleman, Nina Simone, and Bob Marley. Corey's classroom was a refuge, a reminder that history isn't what happened, it's about who's telling the story. He had solace in knowing that he was on the right side of history, and by the time his students arrived for homeroom, Corey's mind was at ease. The day went by so quickly, it was already time for his prep/lunch break. Corey knew how to navigate the campus without having an encounter with Barnes, but something in the air told him to err on the side of caution. He texted his work friend Will to meet him in his classroom for lunch instead of their usual spot. Will was one of the school's custodians, and he also happened to be one of the most insightful and funny people in the school and possibly the entire district. If there were staff superlatives awarded, Will would have definitely received most likely to put a smile on your face. Will didn't explicitly know the truth about Corey, but was clever enough to put two and two together. Will offered Corey some sound advice that gave him the reassurance he needed to get through the remainder of the week, or at least Corey hoped so. By the end of the school day, Corey was ready for his quick commute home. He had a leftover sandwich that he had a mean hankering for once he got settled in, and a Netflix show queued up that paired perfectly with it. And he couldn't forget his homemade Starbucks refresher drink in his favorite mason jar that was sitting in the freezer waiting for him to pour it in. Corey could hear the ice clanking in the jar that moment as he imagined the delicious drink sweating from condensation. Just the thoughts alone of his decompression session was enough to distract him so much that he didn't see Barnes closing in towards him as he walked to his car. She waved at him eagerly and started a brisk jog toward Corey. He quickly waved back and jumped down into his lemon, pretending he couldn't hear her. He narrowly escaped the parking lot, looking at Barnes through his rear-view mirror, just as he liked it. Corey drove into his driveway, thankful once again. He exhaled slowly and deeply, with the intention of leaving his burdens outside of his home. He walked briskly to the door with his mind on his meal. He shoved his hand into his mailbox before unlocking the door. He shuffled through the letters, stopping and then dropping them on the ground in shock. Amongst the parcels was a large envelope written in large, fancy letters. On it read Corey's new address, but his old surname. Corey immediately knew it was from his family. He took a seat, grabbed the letter, and braced himself before opening it. He opened the letter, and butterflies flew out, monarch butterflies with their yellow and orange wings all aflutter. The butterflies danced around him as golden confetti sprinkled the ground beneath Corey's feet. It was an invitation. He began to read it. You are formally and graciously invited to the wedding engagement of Emily Barnes and... He dropped the invitation again, his mouth agape from shock and disbelief. He sat there on his step with his head in his hands. The trees dancing in the breeze and nature carrying on as Corey lamented over this prospective event. He looked around for a second and then began breaking into roaring laughter. He thought of how ironic everything was, and a sense of levity washed over him. Corey got up, shaking his head in amusement and laughing as he unlocked his door, ready to get to his regularly scheduled program. Well, dreamers, that concludes our short story for tonight. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope this brought you good vibes and calm. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unique stories. Remember, these stories are here whenever you need a moment of peace or a sweet escape. Also remember, this is your time to relax and recharge. So I'll leave you with some soothing musical soundscapes on a dark screen to help you get more relaxed. I look forward to our next bedtime adventure, and I wish you a good night's sleep and sweet dreams. Peace.